cho phong như cô tao bỏ cho nha video đó nó anh này cho cô xả sai cho là hay bị pay được thôi nó chỉ cho nó nè lưu ở tuần xa để nó là hỗ trợ player unlimited media chỉ có một được từ phi nó còn đầu lên nó chỉ có yêu bỏ cho là ở tới mình được thôi chứ thà thuê số trả được nó nè mà ít cho cô yêu chắc ít cho cô yêu chỗ bao đó là một tàu mới đại vào đó cho là thả cho hay là hay pay một nó được thôi tới rồi yêu cho face là cũng chỉ bao yêu tiền là cũng chỉ bao trở lại cũng sai cái đâu giờ đã thế gì mà bây giờ nó trong họ chịu trả đâu cho nó đi nó là hay nè sai sẽ là họ chỉ hayได้chỉ cho quân tàu liên tàu đó nó là hay pay đi pay nè sai cho nó lấy ô tô đi giờ thì tiền đi đó cũng chỉ sao thì tiền tiền nó đó gì mà tao cũng chơi nó chỉ nên tôi bỏ nè sai cũng cho nó biết sai nào.
The new special counsel, Jack Smith, is a former acting U.S. attorney who said the investigations would not pause or flag under his watch. We're going to have more on him in just a moment. Let's get right to CNN's senior legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed. What else, Paula, did Attorney General Merrick Garland say about appointing this special counsel?
Well, John, we knew this was something under consideration within the Justice Department. And during that speech, he pointed to the extraordinary nature of these cases and said in order to protect the independence of the Justice Department, he had to make this move.
Damning Epstein emails. It's evidence that is clearly rocking the Trump White House. And now, congressional Democrats who first released a handful of Epstein emails that implicated Trump are finding that what they're doing with facts is working. Remember, this was a development where the Democrats used those emails to bring facts to what had at times felt like a Trump propaganda fight. But the emails, the facts, starting yesterday morning, upended everything.
A new and explosive lawsuit against FBI Director Kash Patel filed by former FBI executive. That lawsuit alleges Patel knowingly broke the law when he carried out the firings at the behest of the White House. And it quotes him as saying he knew he could get sued for firing agents without cause, but that his job depended.
The new special counsel, Jack Smith.
GoDaddy point of sale gives you a powerful POS.
Let's talk about Lisa Murkowski.
I think, let me read a little bit of her statement. And John, I want you to walk there. There are two Republicans who will vote in favor of witnesses, Mitt Romney and Susan Collins of Maine. Lisa Murkowski will vote no. Which is significant. It is sad for me to admit that as an institution, the Congress has failed. It has also become clear some of my promises
nên tôn đầu chỉ niệm một sai cho nó nên thì bảo chỉ có hai đứa chỉ thế bé mà sai cái cú sai cho nó chỉ cú bỏ con nó chỉ cú thế li mà hai mình chỉ thế gì đâu con nó giờ ít có face rồi cú chỉ bảo nên mà sai nên nó click cho nó chỉ như hành động thế hay phải rồi thôi nè nên cho một tụ bộ mong hay gì đa số nó chỉ cú sai chỉ đâu giờ đa thế nên cho gửi cho một tờ đồ cụ thể thế mà lấy hai lấy nó giờ cái dùng một tờ giờ một tờ đồ cho nó nè giờ nên từ họ nhẹ hai chị hai phê thôn nó chứ chỉ thấy hai trong mong sư mong giờ khen gì giờ một giải rất giải cho lên nó thế bây giờ là hai cho mong rồi là bị phô cho mong sư là gì cái sao thế bây giờ tôi cứ chuột cha đi thế tên nó này là tôi ô tô nó chứ giờอยู่หายนั่นแหละอยู่หายโตเทียนก็อยู่หายแล้วก้าแล้วกลัวซึเขานอนจะเจ้าอุตส่าห์จะอีกข้อ AI อีกข้อ Face ได้ใช่ไหมเราอยู่หายหมดเลยเนาะตัวจุ่มนึงว่าจ่าตัวละคนนอนที่ยังวิธีจ่าสาปนตัวจะก็ไม่ใช่ก็เนาะนะ
From last week's riot at the Capitol building has continued, with Republican Senator Pat Toomey the latest to call for Donald Trump to step down. A longtime supporter of Trump, Toomey is the second Republican senator to speak out regarding the president's position. While admitting he believed Trump had committed impeachable offences for inciting last week's mob, he suggested resignation was the only realistic option.
All right, so hold on to your seats because what just happened in federal court is absolutely catastrophic for Donald Trump. I'm talking about a ruling so devastating, so comprehensive, so brutal that even Trump's closest allies are openly saying his presidency is overdone, finished. We're looking at what might be the final nail in the coffin, the moment where everything falls apart at once and there's simply no way out. Because on November 10th, 2025, a federal judge issued a nightmare ruling that didn't just go against Trump, and it absolutely destroyed him. We're talking about massive fraud penalties upheld, asset freezes authorized, criminal contempt referrals filed, and language from the bench so severe, so damning that it left no room for interpretation. The judge basically said, you've been defying the law for too long, you've shown flagrant disregard for the Constitution, and now you're going to face the maximum legal sanctions available, maximum. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's not a warning. That's the court throwing the book at him with full force. And the timing could not be worse for Trump because this ruling comes right as he's already facing those calls for resignation from Congress, right as his political support is crumbling, right as the walls are closing in from every direction. And now the courts have basically said, yeah, we're done playing games with you. Time to pay up, time to face consequences, time to comply with every outstanding order or face immediate arrest. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Let me say that again. Immediate arrest. That's what the judge warned. The ruling specifically states that further non-compliance will result in Trump being taken into custody, not fined, not sanctioned, arrested, like a common criminal. The former president of the United States facing the very real possibility of being handcuffed and led away by federal marshals if he doesn't comply with court orders. Can you even imagine the optics of that, the constitutional crisis that would create? It's insane. It's unprecedented. And it's exactly where we are right now, because Trump has spent years, literally years, defying court orders, ignoring subpoenas, treating the judicial system like it's some kind of suggestion rather than the law of the land. And now a federal judge has had enough, has looked at this pattern of obstruction and repeated violations and open defiance and said, okay, no more. We're done being patient. We're done giving you chances. Now you face the full weight of the law. And the financial implications alone are staggering. We're talking about asset seizures being authorized, Trump's properties, his businesses, his accounts, all potentially on the chopping block. Courts have denied his final appeals. There's no more legal maneuvering, no more delays, no more running out the clock. The enforcement is happening now. Bond orders are in effect. Penalties are being collected. And Trump has no clear way to stop any of it. His legal team has basically run out of options. Every appeal has been rejected. Every motion has been denied. Every argument has been shot down. The courts have spoken, and what they've said is you lose on every front, completely, totally, devastatingly.
Congressman Kinzinger as well. So, Congressman Kinzinger, you've been outspoken about the president's conduct. You've said that the 25th Amendment should be invoked. You've encouraged the vice president to lead that effort. Will you vote for an impeachment resolution?
Look, I'll vote the right way when whatever's put in front of me. There's a lot of still negotiation going on. I honestly don't think impeachment's the smart move because I think it victimizes Donald Trump again. And I think there's a moment that we're in right now.
And within hours of this ruling coming down, the political fallout began. Congressional leaders from both parties started making statements. Republican backers who've stood by Trump for years suddenly went quiet or started distancing themselves. Major donors signaled they could no longer support him. Key White House officials began looking for exits. Cabinet members started having private conversations about what comes next. And the message from all of them was the same. Trump's position is untenable. He can't govern like this. He can't function as president while facing asset seizures and contempt charges and the threat of arrest. Something has to give. And what has to give, according to basically everyone in Washington, is Trump himself. The language coming out of Capitol Hill is brutal. Lawmakers are describing the situation as chaos, a breakdown, a government in crisis. And they're saying the only ways out are resignation, removal, or swift impeachment. Those are the three options. Trump can resign voluntarily and try to preserve some shred of dignity. He can be removed through the 25th Amendment if the cabinet decides he's unable to fulfill his duties, or he can be impeached and convicted by Congress. But one way or another, he's going. That's what people are saying. Not hoping, not suggesting, saying. As in, this is happening. It's just a question of how and when. And political analysts and legal commentators across the spectrum, not just the anti-Trump people, but everyone, are agreeing that this ruling has effectively ended Trump's ability to govern, that you can't be president while your assets are being seized, while you're facing contempt charges, while courts are threatening you with arrest. The position becomes impossible, the credibility evaporates, the authority dissolves, and you're left with a shell of a presidency that can't function. So that's where we are. A federal judge has dropped what might be the most devastating ruling of Trump's entire legal saga. Asset seizures, authorized criminal contempt on the table, threats of immediate arrest for non-compliance, and the political establishment, including Republicans who've defended Trump for years, saying his presidency is effectively over. It's a convergence of legal disaster and political collapse happening simultaneously. A perfect storm that's left Trump with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no clear path forward. And honestly, this might be it. This might be the moment we look back on and say, yeah, that's when it all fell apart. That's when Trump's presidency ended. Not with a whimper, but with a catastrophic court ruling that left him no options except resignation or removal. So let's break down exactly what this ruling says, why it's so devastating, and what happens next, because this story is moving fast and the implications are enormous. Okay, so let's really dig into what this court ruling actually says and why it's such a complete disaster for Trump, because the details here are absolutely critical to understanding just how cornered he is right now. First, let's talk about the asset seizures and financial penalties, because that's the immediate concrete impact of this ruling. Courts have authorized the full enforcement of fraud penalties against Trump. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially billions when you add up all the various cases and judgments. And it's not just theoretical anymore. It's not just a number on paper. The enforcement is actually happening. Courts have denied Trump's final appeals to block these penalties. His legal team tried everything. They filed emergency motions, they argued constitutional violations, they claimed the penalties were excessive and unconstitutional, and the courts said no to all of it. Every single argument was rejected. Every appeal was denied, and now the enforcement mechanisms are kicking in. Bond orders are in effect, which means Trump has to put up massive amounts of money to even appeal, money he may not actually have. Asset freezes are being implemented, which means his properties and businesses can't be sold or transferred while the penalties are being collected. And most devastatingly, actual seizure of assets is on the table, meaning the state can literally take Trump's buildings, his golf courses, his accounts, whatever is needed to satisfy these massive judgments. That's not hyperbole. That's what asset seizure means. The government takes your stuff to pay what you owe. And for Trump, whose entire identity is wrapped up in his wealth and his properties and his image as a successful businessman, this is existential. This isn't just about money. This is about everything he's built his brand on. The Trump Tower, the Mar-a-Lago estate, the golf courses with his name on them, all of it potentially being seized to pay court-ordered penalties. Can you imagine the humiliation? Can you imagine Trump watching as state officials literally take control of his properties? It would be the ultimate destruction of his carefully crafted image. The billionaire real estate mogul reduced to having his assets stripped away by court order, and there's no way to spin that. No way to claim victory, no way to pretend it's all fake news or a witch hunt when actual properties are being seized in the real world, but it gets worse. Because beyond the financial penalties, the judge also made criminal contempt referrals. Criminal, not civil. Criminal contempt means potential jail time. It means Trump could be prosecuted for his repeated defiance of court orders, for his pattern of obstruction, for his open refusal to comply with judicial rulings. And the judge's language on this point was absolutely scathing. According to court documents, the judge said Trump's conduct demonstrates a flagrant disregard for the law and the Constitution flagrant disregard. Those are strong words from a federal judge. Judges usually try to be measured, professional, careful with their language, but here, the judge is basically saying Trump has shown such complete contempt for the legal system that maximum sanctions are warranted. There's no ambiguity there, no suggestion that this was a close call or a difficult decision. The judge is saying the evidence of Trump's misconduct is so clear, so obvious, so overwhelming that there's really no choice but to impose the harshest penalties available. And then there's the warning about immediate arrest for continued non-compliance. This is huge. This is the judge essentially putting Trump on notice. Comply with these orders right now, today, or you will be taken into custody. That's not a theoretical possibility, that's a direct threat. And it puts Trump in an impossible position, because complying with the orders means accepting the penalties, posting the bonds, allowing the asset seizures. It means surrendering, admitting defeat, accepting that the courts have beaten him. And for Trump, who's built his entire political brand on never backing down, never surrendering, always fighting, that's psychologically almost impossible. His instinct is always to fight, to defy, to claim the whole thing is rigged and refuse to comply. But if he does that here, if he continues the pattern of defiance, the judge has made it clear what happens next. Federal marshals show up. Trump gets arrested. And then you've got a sitting president being led away in handcuffs, which would be the biggest constitutional crisis in American history. So Trump is caught between two impossible choices: surrender and accept humiliating defeat, or defy and face arrest. Neither option is viable. Neither option allows him to continue functioning as president. And that's exactly the point where political allies start abandoning ship. Because here's the thing, politicians are fundamentally self-interested. They support leaders when it benefits them politically, when it helps them win elections, raise money, advance their careers. But when a leader becomes a liability, when association with them starts hurting instead of helping, politicians distance themselves fast. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Within hours of this court ruling, major Republican figures who've been staunch Trump supporters for years suddenly started hedging, making careful statements, expressing concern, suggesting maybe it's time for new leadership. Some of them are doing it publicly. Others are doing it in private conversations with donors and other lawmakers. But the message is the same. Trump is done. His position is untenable. We need to start thinking about what comes next. And this isn't just rank and file members of Congress. We're talking about senior leadership. People who've been in Trump's corner through every scandal, every investigation, every crisis, even they're starting to bail. Even they're looking at this court ruling and the financial devastation and the threat of arrest and saying, okay, we can't defend this anymore. This has gone beyond politics into genuine legal jeopardy that we can't be associated with. And the donors, oh man, the donors are fleeing even faster, because wealthy Republican donors who've been funding Trump and his allies, they care about one thing above all: protecting their interests. And when they see a president facing asset seizures and criminal contempt and potential arrest, they start worrying about their own exposure. They start asking questions like, could our donations to Trump be seen as supporting someone who's defying court orders? Could we be dragged into this somehow? And even if the legal risk to them is minimal, there's the reputational risk, the business risk, the risk that being associated with Trump becomes toxic to their other relationships and ventures. So they quietly pull back, stop returning calls, tell their advisors to find other candidates to support, and suddenly Trump's fundraising dries up. His war chest starts running empty. And without money to pay lawyers and run political operations and fund his various legal battles, his position gets even more desperate. It's a downward spiral. The court ruling triggers political abandonment, which triggers financial problems, which makes the legal situation even worse, which causes more political abandonment round and round until there's nothing left. And cabinet officials are having their own calculations, because they're the ones who would have to invoke the 25th Amendment if that's the path forward. They're the ones who would have to make the formal determination that Trump is unable to discharge his duties. And while that seemed far-fetched a week ago, it's starting to look more plausible now, because how can Trump discharge his presidential duties while dealing with asset seizures, while facing criminal contempt charges, while preparing for potential arrest? At some point, the practical reality of the situation makes it impossible to function as president. You can't conduct foreign policy when you're in court fighting to keep your properties. You can't make national security decisions when you're worried about being arrested. You can't govern effectively when your entire focus is on personal legal survival. And cabinet members are looking at that reality and thinking, maybe the 25th Amendment isn't so crazy after all. Maybe it's actually the responsible thing to do. Remove a president who's too consumed by legal problems to actually govern, install the vice president, and try to restore some stability. It's a radical step. But we're in a radical situation. And then there's the impeachment option, which, as we discussed in the last story, is already being actively prepared by Congress. And this court ruling just adds more fuel to that fire, because now you can add defiance of judicial orders to the list of impeachment charges. You can point to this ruling as evidence of Trump's contempt for the rule of law. You can cite the judge's language about flagrant disregard for the Constitution. It all becomes ammunition for impeachment. Evidence that Trump is unfit to hold office, and with Republicans already starting to peel away, with political support crumbling, with donors fleeing. The votes might actually be there, the votes to impeach in the House, the votes to convict in the Senate, which would result in Trump being the first president ever actually removed from office through impeachment. Nixon resigned before it could happen. But Trump might not. Trump might force Congress to actually go through with it. And then we'd be in completely uncharted territory, a president who's been impeached, convicted, and ordered removed, but who might still refuse to leave, who might claim it's all illegitimate, who might try to cling to power despite the constitutional process saying he has to go. That's the nightmare scenario. That's the constitutional crisis everyone's trying to avoid. And it's looking more and more like a real possibility with each passing day. All right, let's break this down into the key points because there's so much happening here, and we need to understand exactly why this court ruling is such a game changer for Trump's presidency. Point one, the court authorized immediate enforcement of massive financial penalties and asset seizures. This isn't theoretical anymore. This isn't some distant possibility. This is happening right now. Courts have denied all of Trump's appeals. All of his legal maneuvering has failed. And now the enforcement mechanisms are kicking in bond requirements that Trump may not be able to meet. Asset freezes that prevent him from moving money or selling properties, and actual seizures where the government can take his buildings and accounts to satisfy court judgments. For Trump, whose entire identity is built around wealth and success and having his name on buildings, this is devastating. This is watching his empire get dismantled by court order, and there's no way to spin it, no way to claim victory. When state officials are literally taking control of Trump properties to pay court-ordered penalties, everyone can see what's happening. The image of success crumbles, the brand gets destroyed, and the financial foundation that supported his political operation starts to collapse. Point two, criminal contempt referrals are on the table. This moves beyond civil penalties into potential criminal prosecution. The judge didn't just fine Trump or impose financial sanctions. The judge referred him for criminal contempt based on his pattern of defying court orders. And criminal contempt means potential jail time. It means Trump could be prosecuted and, if convicted, sent to prison for his refusal to comply with judicial rulings. And the judge's language was absolutely brutal, saying Trump showed flagrant disregard for the law and the Constitution, and that maximum sanctions were warranted. Flagrant disregard from a federal judge. That's not language judges use lightly. That's a judge who's looked at the evidence and concluded that Trump has systematically and deliberately defied the legal system. And when a judge reaches that conclusion, when a judge uses language that strong, it signals that this is serious, that this isn't going away, that Trump is facing real criminal jeopardy for his actions. Point three, the threat of immediate arrest for continued non-compliance puts Trump in an impossible position. The judge specifically warned that if Trump continues to defy court orders, he will be arrested. Not maybe, not possibly, will be. That's a direct threat. And it creates a no-win scenario for Trump. If he complies with the court orders, he has to accept the penalties, post the bonds, allow the asset seizures. He has to surrender, admit defeat, accept that the courts have beaten him. And for someone like Trump, whose entire political brand is built on being a fighter who never backs down, that's psychologically almost impossible. His instinct is always to fight, to defy, to claim the system is rigged. But if he does that here, if he continues the pattern of defiance, federal marshals show up and arrest him. And a sitting president being arrested would be the biggest constitutional crisis in American history. It would dominate every news cycle. It would consume Washington. It would make it impossible for Trump to function as president. So he's caught between surrender and arrest, and neither option allows him to continue his presidency. Point four, political support is collapsing in real time. Within hours of this ruling, we saw congressional leaders from both parties basically saying Trump's position is untenable. Republican backers who've stood by him for years started distancing themselves. Major donors began pulling back. Cabinet officials started having quiet conversations about exit strategies, and the message from all of them was the same. This is unsustainable. You can't be president while facing asset seizures and criminal contempt and threats of arrest. The practical reality of trying to govern under those conditions makes it impossible. And when politicians look at impossible situations, they start looking for exits. They start thinking about self-preservation. They start calculating how to position themselves for whatever comes next. And that calculation increasingly points toward abandoning Trump, getting off the sinking ship before it goes down completely. Because association with a failed, legally doomed presidency becomes toxic. It hurts their own political prospects. So they bail. And each defection makes Trump's position weaker, which triggers more defections, which makes his position even weaker. It's a death spiral. Point 5, this ruling effectively ends Trump's ability to govern. That's what political analysts and legal commentators are saying across the board. Not that it makes governing harder, not that it creates challenges, that it ends his ability to govern. Because how do you conduct foreign policy when world leaders know you're facing asset seizures? How do you make national security decisions when you're worried about being arrested? How do you manage the executive branch when cabinet members are discussing your removal? How do you work with Congress when lawmakers from both parties are calling for your resignation? How do you maintain any authority or credibility when courts are taking your properties and threatening you with jail? The practical answer is, you can't. The presidency requires authority. It requires credibility. It requires people believing that when you make a decision or give an order, it matters. But when you're in the kind of legal and political freefall Trump is in right now, that authority evaporates. Orders get ignored, decisions get questioned, authority dissolves, and you're left with the title of president, but none of the actual power. So what happens next? Well, based on everything we're seeing, Trump basically has 3 options. Option 1, he resigns. He recognizes that his position is untenable, that he can't govern effectively under these circumstances, and he steps down voluntarily. Maybe he tries to negotiate some kind of deal, resignation, in exchange for certain legal protections or pardons or agreements about how the transition happens. But either way, he leaves office on his own terms rather than being forced out. That would be the dignified option, the one that preserves some shred of respect and allows him to control the narrative, at least a little bit. But based on everything we know about Trump's personality and history, this seems unlikely. He doesn't back down. He doesn't surrender. He fights to the end, regardless of the odds. Option 2, the 25th Amendment. The vice president and cabinet determined that Trump is unable to discharge his duties and remove him from office. This seemed far-fetched a week ago, but it's looking more plausible now. Because the practical reality is that Trump may genuinely be unable to function as president while dealing with all these legal crises, and cabinet members who are watching this unfold might conclude that invoking the 25th Amendment is actually the responsible thing to do. Remove a president who's too consumed by legal problems to govern, install the vice president, and try to restore stability. It would be controversial. It would be unprecedented in this context. But it might be the path of least chaos compared to the alternatives. Option 3, impeachment and removal. Congress goes through with the impeachment proceedings that are already being prepared. The House votes to impeach the Senate, holds a trial. And with Republican support crumbling, with political consensus forming around the idea that Trump can't continue, the Senate actually convicts and removes him. That would be historic. No president has ever been removed through impeachment, but the political dynamics right now suggest it's possible, maybe even likely. And if it happens, we're in completely uncharted territory. Because what if Trump refuses to accept it? What if he claims the whole thing is illegitimate and tries to stay in office anyway? Then you've got a genuine constitutional crisis that might require law enforcement or military intervention to resolve. That's the nightmare scenario everyone's trying to avoid. But one way or another, the consensus seems to be that Trump is going, that this court ruling was the final straw. The thing that pushed an already precarious situation over the edge into complete collapse, and whether it happens through resignation, the 25th Amendment, or impeachment, Trump's presidency appears to be in its final days. The legal walls have closed in. The political support has evaporated. The financial penalties are being enforced. The threats of arrest are real. And there's simply no path forward that allows him to continue governing effectively. So we're watching the end game play out in real time. The final chapter of the Trump presidency. And it's messy, it's chaotic, it's unprecedented, but it's happening. Right now, as we speak, the pieces are moving, the decisions are being made, and within days, maybe even hours, we're going to know how this ends. Whether Trump resigns, whether he's removed, whether there's some other outcome nobody has predicted yet. But the era of Trump's presidency surviving through sheer force of will and political loyalty, that era is over. The court ruling saw to that, and now it's just a question of how the final act plays out. So that's the story. A devastating court ruling that authorized asset seizures, criminal contempt, and threats of arrest, political support collapsing across the board. And a growing consensus that Trump's presidency is effectively over. It's a convergence of legal disaster and political breakdown happening simultaneously. A perfect storm that's left Trump with no viable options except resignation or removal. And honestly, we're probably going to know the answer very soon because this situation is moving fast, faster than anyone expected. And the resolution, whatever it is coming. So stay tuned. Keep watching, because history is being made right now, and you're witnessing it in real time.
Sajong chapter to của cho cái tên cha phong dư ở bên tôi sĩ trâu là nó đầu niên đầu xong ni tiếp bỏ cho chua trở cái một tàu đu một tàu họ chua trở cái nhau nó một lý trí trâu giả nhau đồ nó nè chỉ cú một cho run chúa thì nó cho tôi cho nó chỉ một cho làm uo cả khóa chỉ muốn đi cho lúc cổ bổng lại ấy yếu nó thời niên thời xong mà cú bỏ tàu cú bao tàu tiền thì lâu tuổi chỉ nó cho chua trở cái này của tôi một rõ thế yếu nó một cái lọ thế chỉ ta nó trong tôi cho vào nè chế lúa là chẳng như mình nó cho nó chỉ của tôi tu nè để cho lúa chế nó tròn xa chia sẻ sai thế của tôi tên mình đã rong cho mình nó này nó cho luôn này nó lơ chân sai cho mình chỉ lúa lơ chỉ lơ mua là lúa mì để cho mình nó vấn đề cứ mua cho mình đồ nó mà nó ít có bông bé có bông nên nó chỉ cái gì đó khó giờ ít nó có nó li và nó bé ploi portion do ploi ta số portion đủ nó chỉ bé bông nên nó ít bông nó chỉ cho được là chỉ ít bộ chỉ cho được là chỉ cả có tụ bên này nó ít liền có ít trồng nó nhon để ít tàu nó chỉ mua nền có bé trồng nhon đồ hậu chỉ kia trồng nền có tụ cái nữa mà lần từ họ giờ xả tàu nó lấy cái lá nó ai yêu cho family nó sẽ là cái rong họ cho mua mình nó là cái rong cho cái nhớ cho state và nó lấy tại sao mình nó start Wisconsin một trong Michigan thế nó chỉ lúc chạy nó bị chỉ mua cho cái là chỉ tại sao nó cứ walu company cứ cho cái nó hú theo mom and dad ở bộ chicken này giờ chỉ nó từ xả tàu chỉ hú to thì từ bỏ cho cái tu cái này nó mới tu cũng mua chú nè chỉ muốn cho cái nó hoàn toàn được bỏ đồ hộp lúa cá chủ đen đó chỉ mà muốn tụi cái cho sầu chỉ in chỉ có nó cho hoàn nó quá này chỉ cho để cái chủ đó họ tụi cái nhớ số nó mặc khóa thêm lòng chè cá cưng gọi liền từ xã tàu để chỉ hú tôi để tụi tàu nó cho chua nó muốn qua tàu rồi rong nó year round để xin nó mua available nhớ online thì nhớ được tụi tàu nó đấy tận đây này nhớ đồ ta la cho lúc ta la mong mua là chỉ nên một nông là giờ mua cho cái này nhớ đồ từ bây giờ ta la mong cho grocery là giờ cho và ta la lo nhớ được mình cả thế nào là giờ mua rồi cho nó này giờ ít cho cứ giờ nhớ đồ ta la những từ xả tàu xả bỏ xả bao này chỉ giờ trong một số này ta la thế nông tụ ta la thế nếu bỏ mua giờ cho cái nó chỉ là tây ni chỉ muốn nó là bên mà sắm rồi hiểu muốn là chỉ cần chỉ continue to you and the sapon tàu hun là tụ stong mua available ta xin nó là na